Hey guys, my name is Kirk Veldman, and this is my missional integration report for Missional Living Final. I'm doing option 3. So this is the project into the future and imagine working in your chosen profession in a specific location prompt. Um, and so what I'm going to start out doing is start sharing where the context I've chosen, so where I'm going to live, and what job I'm going to be doing. So where I'm going to live, I'm going to call it University or College Town X. I'm not really sure yet where I'm going to be going, but college towns and university towns are all super similar, right? So um, we'll just go ahead and call it College Town X because we're working in the same kind of bubble, same kind of environment, pretty much wherever I go. And so my future profession there is faculty member in the history department. That's where I'm feeling called. That's where I'm feeling led to go right now. And so a little bit of how to live on mission in that situation. The first thing I want to do is get plugged into a good church. So I can't live on mission if I don't have a place to refer people to go, if I don't have people to fall back on myself, if I don't have people to talk to and discuss with, discuss scripture, discuss all sorts of other things like discipleship. If I don't have any of that, I can't be an effective disciple maker and I can't live missionally. So priority number 1, get plugged into a good church. Number 2, we're going to be constantly praying for the school and my students. So at public university, you can't really be out loud preaching the scripture in class, that kind of stuff, right? Because you'll get in trouble in a hurry. Somebody will come with a lawsuit, almost guaranteed. So that doesn't mean we can't pray, though. They won't know if we're praying for them, right? And one of the things as Christians that I feel like we often forget is the actual power of prayer. So if we can't underestimate that. If we're praying for these people and God intends to use them for His good, He will. And so just constantly be praying. That's one of the best ways to live missionally, is be praying for the people around you, be praying for your job, praying for whoever it is you interact with. For me, it'd be my students in the school. Also, living missionally, be a good witness via my actions. So even if I can't preach the scripture in class, I can still act like a Christian. I can still talk like a Christian. I can still have a good attitude. What happens a lot of times in these higher ed situations is these faculty members are full of pride because of what they've done and what they've accomplished. So avoiding that and just being humble, talking to students where they're at, listening to them, acknowledging their ideas, not just shooting them down and scoffing and I'm so much better than you, right? Just being humble. Those actions are a witness to something different in you. And so just doing that, acting differently than the world, is also a good way to live on mission. Also, so like I said, we're going to hit this quite a few times. I can't preach the gospel, but I can share the gospel when I'm asked. So let's say a student walks into my office, sees a book on my shelf, and is like, "Oh, what's that about?" And it's a Christian book. I'd be like, "Well, it's about Christianity." Well, what? Walk me through that. What does that mean? That kind of stuff. So even if I can't start the conversation, I can carry it through to fruition. I can share about Jesus at the end of these conversations and have them if somebody else instigates them. So just constantly being ready to do that. Same thing with colleagues. A colleague walks into my office and they're like, "Hey, what's that book about?" Or, "Hey, what's that saying mean on your wall?" Anything, really. If they notice anything, just being ready to share the gospel whenever and wherever. Drop everything and share the gospel. Just being ready to do that. Okay, so number 2 is going to be, how would you live on mission while respecting the cultural norms of the organization for which you work? So, university's public, so I can't respect the culture and the norms and share the gospel in front of classes. It's just not, it'll get me in trouble, it'll get the university in trouble. It's not an effective tool for anybody in this situation. However, like I mentioned just before, I can keep books and whatever books I want in my office. And from a history perspective especially, students, from experience, I know that students are walking into their professors' offices. They're looking around, like, what is this guy reading? What do I want to start reading? What books does he have on his shelves that I want on mine? And so keeping solid Christian books, even historical Christian books, like guys like Eric Metaxas. He's written about William Wilberforce. He's written about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Guys like that, actual legitimate historical figures who had a massive impact in their societies. You can talk about them and say, yeah, you should read this. And their witness can be a witness for the student. They can witness to the students through a book, which is really, really cool. Um, like respecting cultural norms. I can meet students where they're at. Cultural norms of college is you eat in the dining hall, you work in common areas, like you work with other students. I can do that as well. I can go eat in the dining hall, talk to students, say, hey, how's it going? I can go work in the common areas every once in a while, go read in the library. Like just being available and being in and amongst college students where they're at is a good way to live on mission, even if you're not preaching the gospel constantly. Um, yeah, and like I said, I can totally finish up a conversation with a student if they instigate it talking about Christ and the gospel or Christianity, anything really. Um, how would you build redemptive relationships with the people you work with? So I would start doing this by building close friendships first. So inviting groups of students to my house, inviting colleagues over, bringing colleagues out to lunch, just visiting them in their offices in general. So much of the world is self-centered, right? Like nobody is just observational anymore. Like if you see somebody having a bad day, one of your colleagues is having a bad day in his office, you can just tell. Go over there and say, hey, I can tell you're having a bad day. Like I'm here for you if you want to talk. Like just come on over. You don't have to press the issue, but just tell them you're available, right? Um, and so just being different from the world is a great way to have people say, something's different about him. Like what is it? Let's go. Like I'm gonna go talk to him and ask him, and just be ready to answer those questions. Um, and then after this friendship is established, whether it be with a group of students or whether it be with an individual colleague, what have you, once that trust is built, you can start asking deep questions. Deep questions working towards like what they believe about God, what they believe about after they die, uh, that kind of stuff. And once you do that, you can start sharing the gospel from there. You can say, well, this is what I believe. What happens after I die is I go spend eternity with Jesus. Um, and so you can start doing this. And once you share the gospel, you can invite them to church. Hey, like, if you want to know more about this, come on over to my church. That's why finding a church is so important. Um, and so once they get into this process, then you can start intentionally discipling them and building that redemptive relationship even further. So number 4 is really similar in the university setting, right? So how do you build a redemptive relationship with the customers that you meet in the vocational context? The customers are the students, so the process would be almost identical. I would not probably do one-on-ones with students. I would probably do students in small groups, which would be a difference. But um, so when I start interacting with them, like being in front of them in smaller classes, or start having students over for barbecues in my backyard, or having students over for just fun stuff like that. It's a great way to start building these deeper relationships and then bringing them through what we just talked about. um, Number 5 is probably my favorite question in terms of number 5 and number 7. So the discipling and how would you leverage your vocation for greater kingdom impact? College campuses are ideal for this. So if we think about the apple tree model we used in class, it's sowing a bunch of different seeds, right? It's not just planting one tree and going as deep as possible with those roots. And what greater way to do this than having a rotation of people every 4 years that comes through your university and comes through your classroom? So since students are there for only a few years, it's enough time to build a relationship, disciple them, and then send them out to repeat the process, and then boom, you have freshmen. And so if you do this effectively, let's say even if you reach 5 people in 1 year, and then they go out and reach 5 more people the next year just by themselves, that's 25 people within 1 year. And if they do that, then you start talking about hundreds of people, thousands of people within a span of just a few years. Um, you want to talk about great kingdom impact, that's it. Just having people sowing their own seeds once they're done and through you, through what you've taught them. Also, as a professional historian, you're writing books and articles, so that doesn't mean you can only write them in your university's publication. You can write them for Christian publications. You can write books for Christian publishers. Um, it's so you, greater kingdom impact does not necessarily mean making disciples, making new believers. It can also be strengthening believers, emboldening them to go share their faith as well. And writing books and articles that embolden them is a great way to do this, and a great way to encourage them to go and make disciples in their own ways, whatever it be. Number 6, how would you share the gospel with people you work with? and customers, so students, what scripture would use. So being history people, we like logic, we like progression. So I would do the Genesis model. Start Genesis 1, so start with creation, how the world came to be. Number 2, what happened, why did it fall? And number 3, what's the promise that we're given that how the world's going to be saved. So we like I'd walk them through. Well, God created the heavens and the earth, all this stuff. Yeah, man sinned, and then God promised that Jesus would come. And so bring them through some of the history of the Old Testament, the Exodus, all of this stuff, right? Bring them through the prophets like Isaiah, whichever ones you want to pick, really. And then point to Jesus being the culmination of all of this. He's the guy that saved the world, and he's the guy that can save you as well. And so I would probably go with the Genesis method of the history and of the world and how it's all come up to this point to where you can be saved. And then how would you disciple them? So I really love this question. So history people are book people, right? We learn well through books. So my discipleship method would revolve around reading and asking questions and meeting with them and discussing the books. So if we bring them through the infant, child, young adult, parent model, infants need to know about God. They need to know who He is and how He operates. So, Making Sense of God by Tim Keller. Perfect book for this. Same thing with this one, 50 Reasons Why Jesus Came to Die, John Piper. Just a thin guy, but all of them are great resources for these spiritual children. Even Mere Christianity, another good resource. Just books about who God is and why Christianity is logically sound, it's theologically sound, all of this stuff, right? Because they need to be reinforced in their faith right away. Same thing with children. Walk them through those books. And then we start into The Pursuit of Holiness by Jerry Bridges. The Holiness of God by R.C. Sproul. Once you get into the children and young adult, we want them to know, children and young adult stage, we want them to start really knowing about God and who He is and what the mission of Christianity is. So living holy, living in a holy lifestyle, living missionally, all this stuff. And so just bringing these students through solid books, and then when you get into the parent stage, encourage them to start reading books on their own, being ready to recommend books on their own. So that means that I have to be reading as well. And so not only does it disciple people, but it also keeps me accountable because I have to be reading the material to make sure that I get it right. And so it really benefits everybody else in the whole equation. So that's my presentation. Thanks for watching.